important point to understand that no, أن الذي ينبغي اعتماده, that is the view that needs to be the relied upon view. واعلم أن الذي ينبغي اعتماده, the relied upon view is that أن المنكر والشاذ يشتركان, that is these two categories, al-munkar and al-shadh, يشتركان يعني they're together, or they bear the same meaning in terms of the مسمى المخالفة, the opposition that's happening. So وما يخالف ثقة فيه الملا, the way we covered as Shādh is that in which a trustworthy narrator was opposing a group of people who were transmitting something. So there was an opposition. That's called a Shādh narration, right? There's the Shādh narration has the concept of mukhalafa in it. The Munkar narration also has the concept of mukhalafa, because we looked at it as As-Suyuti rahimahullah described it, al-Munkar alladhi rawa ghayru thiqah mukhalifan fi nukhbatin qad haqqaqah. That is the narration that is narrated by a person who is not reliable, and it opposes another person who is reliable, as it's said here by al-Mashshāṭ rahimahullah, that this person has to be rajih. The person who transmits the narration that is ma'ruf, which is the opposite of munkar, has to be rajih. So the munkar narration is also transmitted, and there is an opposition between what is being transmitted by the person who is transmitting munkar anomalously, and also in Shādh there's a mukhalifa. So in terms of mukhalifa itself, an opposition, they're the same. He says yashtarikan. Al-Mashshāṭ says that they're the same. However, there is a difference between the two. That is yaftariqan. He says that is yaftariqan. They are separate in terms of أن المنكر, the narration that is munkar, رواية ضعيف أو مستور. This needs to be understood. This is a very important point that he has mentioned here. That is not only that you have to, the munkar narration is considered munkar if the person who is transmitting it and opposing others in his transmission, because he's anomalously reporting it, he's not only considered to be ضعيف, the other possibility of this person being an unknown, mastur, is also something that would make the narration munkar. So in general, you would say the unreliability of the narrator has to be confirmed in munkar, along with the opposition that is the mukhalifa. But in Shādh, what's happening is, and that's how the definition happened too, وَمَا يُخَالِفْ ثِقَةٌ فِيهِ الْمَلَةِ, that is a person who's thiqah. But as I said, we commented on there before too, that it could be a reliable person too, and the reliability is inclusive. It could be a person who's extremely reliable, that is a thiqah narrator, or he's saduq, who's fairly reliable. Who's a bit level, who's like slightly less reliable than a person who's a thiqah. But both of them, they fall under adala, and which is a good example mentioned here, because we just discussed that Yahya Muhammad ibn Qais al-Dhahabi rahmallah, from the latter scholars of hadith, he calls him thiqah in Diwan al-Du'afa, the same person he calls saduq in Man Tukullima Fih. So you can understand from that the reliability in terms of adala itself is acceptable according to him. So the main difference between a munkar and a shadh narration is that even though they're the same in terms of the opposition that exists, that is, one person is negating or opposing other narrators in munkar, and one person is negating in shadh as well, but they are separate, they're different, they're not the same in terms of the munkar being a narrator, a narration of a person who is unreliable, or unreliable in the sense of him being declared weak, or unreliable in the sense of, or in the meaning of him being unknown. Either way, this general unreliability will be looked at, and that's when you call the narration a munkar. As for shadh narration, that will be something that has been narrated by someone who's reliable in general, and that could be either being trustworthy, or this person could be just reliable, you can say, or fairly reliable. So either way, this person is reliable. So even though we would say the definitions require that such piece of information are not lost, but I discussed it before too, that There are some details that just need to be understood, but al-Bayqūniyyah's definitions a lot of times are not considered to be on point. So in his definition of a Shādh, and we talked about it when we're doing a Shādh too, that we will talk about Munkar and compared both of them together. That is, وَمَا يُخَالِفْ ثِقَةٌ, he says. Others have said similar thing too, but over there, the word thiqa should not be understood as something that excludes a saduq narrator, because technically, وَمَا يُخَالِفْ ثِقَةٌ أو صَدُوقٌ al-mala' is what you're supposed to understand. If a person who is trustworthy, his thiqa, or his saduq, if he opposes a group of narrators, or just one narrator who's considered to be more reliable than him, we discussed that too, and then that narration is considered to be Shādh. That is a reliable person narrating and opposing other people who are also reliable or more reliable than him. And if a person who is unreliable, he narrates something in the sense of being weak or being unknown, an unknown narrator is also unreliable, then that narration is considered to be munkar. Why was this farq clarified? Well, one thing is to understand the definitions themselves. They become a lot more clear if you were to break them down and compare them to other different terminologies, because they do have the same meaning of opposition established for them. So it's clear, a clear picture is known if you were to say the yashtarikan and yaftariqan aspect of it, that they come together at one point and they're separate at another point. So narration could be Shādh, and can it be considered to be munkar too if you were to look at mukhalif itself? And narration would, in terms of the narrator himself or herself and his or her reliability, then they cannot be the same. Munkar is different from Shādh. This indirectly is also referring to the famous khilaf that occurred, the famous difference of opinion that occurred among the early scholars of or experts of Ḥadīth Nomenclature, more precisely Ibn Salah, who very clearly in his Muqaddimah considers both of them to be the same. And he says that you can consider them to be categories, one of them to be the subcategory of the other. The people, the scholars that came after, who wrote nukat, critical notes on Ibn Salah's Muqaddimah, they very thoroughly mentioned how incorrect that view is. And the correct view is that, as mentioned by al-Mashshāṭ rahimahullah here as well, that a munkar narration is not the same, is not exactly the same as Shādh. And what made Ibn Salah go in the direction was because he was just looking at one aspect of it, that is a mukhalifah. From that aspect, you can say that if a narrator is a mukhalif, then that could be divided into munkar and Shādh. But the terms or the hadith themselves, they're different in essence, because one of them requires that riwayah has to be of a person who's reliable, and the other one requires that riwayah has to be of someone who's not reliable. As-Suyuti rahimahullah points this out too, and he says, which I quoted after the definition, al-Munkar alladhi rawa ghayru thiqah mukhalifan fi nukhbatin qad haqqaqah qabalahu al-ma'ruf walladhi ra'a taraduf al-munkar wash-shādh na'ah. He says qabalahu al-ma'ruf, the opposite of al-munkar is al-ma'ruf, walladhi ra'a, and the person who views. ترادف المنكر والشاذ نأى, that is a person who views that munkar and shadh are synonymous. نأى بعده, this person has become distant from the truth, the correct view. And he's indirectly referring to Ibn Salah rahimahullah.